Hello there, you amazing viewers and subscribers, and welcome to a brand new YouTube Doctor Who series to celebrate 60 years of the show. And for this, I decided to do a kind of a discussion type video for each incarnation of the Doctor, including the actors that have played them. I mean, for this one, I'm going to be doing this video series starting on the first Doctor, and we've had 3 actors to play the first Doctor in Doctor Who's 60th anniversary. We have the original actor, aka William Hartnell, from 1963 to 1966, as well as 1972 and 1973. We have Richard Hurndall, who played the character in 1983 for the story known as The Five Doctors. And of course, we have David Bradley, who has played the character in Twice Upon a Time in 2017, and more recently in The Power of the Doctor for 2022. So I kind of want to talk about a bit about the first Doctor, because I've kind of had a few people ask me, like, oh, how do I describe the first Doctor? What made me go and rewatch his era when I was growing up? Because this is the Doctor. I basically started off watching Doctor Who with Jon Pertwee and Tom Baker. I didn't really watch Hartnell until basically around about 2005, 2006 time. And I actually quite enjoy William Hartnell's performance as the first Doctor. I think it's brilliant. I think it's amazing. Some of the stuff that his Doctor does is absolutely brilliant and iconic. So, summing up the first Doctor, I have to talk about his companions before I get to the first Doctor. So, the first Doctor kind of travelled with his granddaughter Susan for the first half of his life while travelling in the TARDIS, as well as kidnapping 2 of her school teachers later on, aka Ian and Barbara. After he departs Susan because she's fallen in love with David, the Doctor ends up going on to a planet where he ends up rescuing an orphan known as Vicky. And of course, Ian and Barbara and the Doctor end up kind of adopting Vicky, and the Doctor kind of adopted Vicky as an adoptive granddaughter. And then, of course, later on during their time, Ian and Barbara ended up going back in time to their own time, but by missing out 2 years in 1965, thanks to a Dalek time machine. Vicky does leave the Doctor in the next season, aka season 3, because she ends up falling in love in Troy in The Mythmakers, which is actually kind of a good story. I think it's absolutely brilliant. But before Vicky left, we do have an introduction to a new companion, aka Stephen Taylor, played by Peter Purves. Stephen basically does travel with the first Doctor quite a lot before he departs in The Smugglers, containing that Stephen basically helps the Doctor defeat the Daleks twice in The Chase and, of course, the Daleks' Master Plan. We say goodbye to Katrina, who basically joined them for one story before she ends up dying. And, of course, they kind of witnessed Sarah Kingdom's death, and later on they ended up basically travelling with Dodo, who is the least far popular companion for me. I really do not like Dodo. I think her writing was terrible. Some of her acting was. And then, of course, when Stephen left and the Doctor was just travelling with Dodo, she ends up basically staying on Earth because the contract for the actress that was playing her kind of ran out after episode 2 of The War Machines. But the first Doctor does end up with 2 new companions, aka Ben and Polly. And Ben and Polly are the first 2 companions in Doctor history to witness a regeneration between a Doctor, because Ben and Polly ended up joining the first Doctor at the end of the War Games while travelling with them to the Smugglers. And then, of course, when they ended up going into the events of the 10th planet, where Mondas comes back into Earth orbit, and, of course, the Doctor's body is starting to wear a bit thin, the Doctor ends up collapsing and regenerating in front of them into the next incarnation, played by Patrick Troughton. So that's a little bit of the companions. The first Doctor, how can I say about him? Well, the first Doctor mellows over time, because when we kind of first meet him, he's basically more of a kind of a grumpy old man who basically doesn't want anybody to find a way into the TARDIS, but that's why he's angry when Ian and Barbara do. He's very, very dark and mysterious, the first Doctor is, because when I say he's very, very dark, you can see him considering about bashing somebody's head in with a rock in the very first story, known as The Unearthly Child, or The Cave of Skulls. You can actually see him picking up and planning on bashing this caveman's head in with a rock, just so they can all escape to the TARDIS. Then, of course, basically, he ends up tricking Ian and Barbara and Susan because he wants to go into the Dalek City in the next story, aka the Daleks, where basically they're all starting to become ill by radiation poisoning. But that is another story for when I get to the Daleks. Then, of course, the first Doctor travelled with Susan, Ian and Barbara for quite a while because they end up meeting the Daleks, they end up meeting Marco Polo, they end up going back in time to the Aztecs, including searching for the Keys of Time and visiting one of Earth's darkest periods, the Reign of Terror, the French Revolution. And then, of course, when the TARDIS ends up just shrinking with them in Planet of the Giants, and of course, we say goodbye to Susan at the end of the Dalek Invasion of Earth, when Susan basically ends up falling in love during the events with a human known as David. Ian and Barbara basically kind of want to get back to their own time, so they do try and talk to the Doctor about taking them back to Earth, but the Doctor at this point in time doesn't really know how to control the TARDIS, so really they're just kind of rondling through time, hoping they can get back to 1963. Ian and Barbara then end up basically do finding a way back in time, but they miss out by 2 years and coming back in 1965. So they've got to try and find a way how they're going to explain their kind of missing periods between 1963 and 1965. Oh yeah, we kind of got kidnapped by an alien, well, by somebody called himself the Doctor, and we kind of got kidnapped. William Hartnell's performance is absolutely brilliant as the first Doctor. I do quite enjoy William Hartnell's performance. Every actor that the first Doctor has had as a companion, Hartnell gives such a great performance. Yes, he does, doesn't he? Yes, he does. I really do like William Hartnell's performance. He's, as I say, he mellows over the course of the time as him as the Doctor. So when we first meet the Doctor, he's this old, grumpy person. He could bash your head in with a rock. And he mellows by the time of his regeneration. And of course, this is the Doctor that shows that he won't be intimidated. And that is basically talking about the events, what happens in the War Games, where you kind of got a war machine heading towards the Doctor, and the Doctor's just there, kind of walking towards it with the touching his propels and just kind of showing the machine it won't be intimidated, while all the human soldiers are basically running back towards him, which is absolutely quite funny when you just got all the humans literally walking away, like running away from this deadly war machine, and the Doctor's just there standing up to it. Such an iconic scene. I do enjoy the first Doctor's like kind of impact on Vicky, because Vicky does have an impact on him, because she does basically make him change his mind when he's there being stubborn about Ian and Barbara. Talking about the villains the first Doctor has basically encountered, only as so far, only 3 of his villains are basically returned to the show, with the Daleks returning in 2005, and they were actually encountered by Hartnell first, and then the Cybermen when he regenerated, and now in the 60th anniversary we have the return of the Celestial Toymaker, making the first Doctor series only has 3 villains that's basically come back to fight against the new incarnations of the Doctor. I'm quite looking forward to seeing how the stories are going to pan out with the Celestial Toymaker in the 60th anniversary. I quite enjoy episode 4 of what I'm trying to say is the Doctor, the Celestial Toymaker is absolutely a brilliant story. And it's highly rumoured that the story is to be animated soon, so I'm quite enjoying when that does get animated. I do quite enjoy Hartnell's performance. He's absolutely brilliant and amazing. If I was going to talk about my 5 favourite episodes from the Hartnell's era, some people will probably look at me and think I've gone insane with most of these, and some of them will probably agree with me. So the 5 stories I actually do quite enjoy is The War Machines from season 3. I really think this story is absolutely brilliant. Yes, okay, Dodo goes by the end of episode 2, but I really do like the first Doctor with Ben and Polly, because the way he literally puts on the sign on the TARDIS saying "Do not out of order," I find that a little bit funny, and I do enjoy the first Doctor in this story. Next story I kind of want to mention in second place has got to go to the Dalek Invasion of Earth, just because it's absolutely iconic, and to come from Doctor Who's 2nd season, this was actually my very first ever William Hartnell story I ever watched with my dad, believe it or not. The Dalek Invasion of Earth, when the Daleks comes out of the Thames and we say goodbye to Susan, and we have that iconic line, "One day I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs. and prove to me that I am not mistaken in mine. So I do enjoy that, which is why I've got to say it's the second best story of the first Doctor's era. In third place, I'm going to have to say it's got to go to the Daleks, aka the second story of Doctor Who. It's nice to see the first Doctor basically realising his mistake because of tricking Ian and Barbara and Susan to go into the city to look for Mercury, where the Doctor's basically loosened the lid on it, so the TARDIS saying that, oh, the TARDIS can't work without Mercury. And of course, they end up getting infected by radiation poisoning, which is absolutely brilliant of a story. It's 7 parts long, and it's now available on BBC iPlayer if you haven't seen the first ever story of the Daleks and Doctor Who's second story in general. The third, well, yeah, the fourth story I kind of want to mention is another one from season 1, which is the Aztecs, because I do actually quite enjoy the Aztecs. I think it's a fantastic story set in the 15th century in Mexico. And when you got Barbara trying to change history and you got the first Doctor going, "You cannot rewrite history, not one line, believe me, I know. Absolutely brilliant. I do quite enjoy it. And then the fifth story I kind of want to mention is, of course, Hartnell's last story, aka The 10th Planet, where the Doctor is there trying to warn these human scientists, oh, you're going to be visited by another planet. What? And it's literally like the first Doctor does know what's going to happen, and then the Simon do invade, and then, of course, it says, this old body of mine's wearing a bit thin. And then, of course, he ends up collapsing and regenerate into Patrick Troughton. And the Cybermen are actually quite scary in this episode, even though they are literally covered in loincloths. If I was watching this back in 1966, I think I would have probably been scared as a child when the Cybermen came on. They're not as scary as much until later on when they come back in the Troughton era, where you just got the little flippy flop thing when they're just talking. So yeah, I do kind of enjoy the first Doctor's era. I've got 5 stories I actually have mentioned to give you to watch for the first Doctor's era. Now they're on BBC iPlayer. I absolutely do enjoy the first Doctor. As I say, he does start off being really, really grumpy and grudgy, and the fact that he's got some dark elements, and then of course it's nice to see him mellow over time with Susan, Ian and Barbara, later with Vicky, and then of course with Stephen he mellows a little bit more. Katrina, he does mellow, but unfortunately she doesn't really last long in the TARDIS because she ends up dying in the next story of her story, because she actually does come into it at the end of basically the Mythmakers, and then of course she ends up dying in the Daleks Master Plan. Sarah Kingdom ends up being joined by the Doctor, joining the Doctor and Stephen, but she ends up dying in the same story. Stephen has a happy ending, I think. I don't know much about Stephen's last story. I have got a CD. It's been a while since I listened to it, but it's nice to say Stephen did kind of had a happy ending. And of course, we say goodbye to Dodo, which I don't really care for because I really find her so boring. I mean, out of the 3 stories we've got existing for the first Doctor for season 3, 2 of them are absolute complete duds, which is the Ark and the Gunfighters. They're the ones I don't physically enjoy, but the War Machines I kind of do. Ben and Polly, in fact, they've only encountered, I've got 2 out of 3 of the stories with William Hartnell because they do exist on the BBC Archives, and episode 4 of the 10th Planet has been animated. I am hoping with the Smugglers animated, that means Ben and Polly's kind of journey with the Doctor is basically nearly complete, as we got 3 stories with the first Doctor, 2, and then of course they literally have like 6 or 7 stories with Patrick Troughton's second Doctor, or with them in it. I do quite enjoy this first Doctor's era. It's not one of my personal favourites. It's not in my top 5, but it is actually a quite decent era, so I would highly recommend it, including when we meet another Time Lord for the first time, aka the Meddling Monk, who basically I do think needs to return into the landscape of the TV universe. So, let me know in the comments, what do you think of the first Doctor? Do you quite enjoy his era? Do you not enjoy it? Let me know in the comments. Please do like, subscribe, and share, and join for more awesome Doctor Who content.